My name is Evelyn Carter. I am 76 years old, and I have lived most of my life in Savannah, Georgia, in the same white-framed house my husband and I bought when we were just starting out. People around here know me as the quiet widow who tends roses in the front yard and never misses Sunday service. What they do not know is that behind these shutters, behind my quiet smile, there is a story, one that still keeps me awake some nights. Before we dive into family betrayal, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Hearing from people around the world makes these stories even more powerful and reminds us how connected we all are. It began as so many turning points do on an ordinary evening. My daughter Rachel was supposed to come down from New York for a rare family dinner. I had roasted a chicken, the way she used to like it when she was little, with rosemary from the garden and potatoes crisped in butter. The table was set with the old china my mother handed down. The candles flickered against the glass windows, and for a brief moment I allowed myself to believe that we could go back just for a night to the days when Rachel was my little girl who couldn't fall asleep without holding my hand. But Rachel never walked through that door. Instead, she called an hour before dinner to say her meeting had run long, her firm needed her, and she would not be coming. I told her it was fine. Mothers always say it is fine. We swallow the disappointment so our children won't hear it in our voice. After I hung up, I sat down at the table set for two, bowed my head, and whispered a prayer for strength. I suppose it was the stress or perhaps the loneliness that caught up with me. Halfway through clearing the dishes, I felt a sharp pain seize my chest. My breath shortened, my knees gave way, and the next thing I knew, I was staring at the ceiling lights of St. Joseph's Hospital. The nurses rushed around me, attaching wires, murmuring terms I could not follow. In the haze, one thought rose above the rest: call Rachel. Please call my daughter. The nurse did as I asked. She told me later that Rachel answered politely but firmly. She said, "I can't leave New York right now. Tell my mother I'll visit when I can." That sentence landed heavier than any illness in my chest. Lying there with machines beeping around me, I remembered nights long ago when Rachel had fevers as a child. I would sit beside her bed with a cool cloth on her forehead until she slept. I never once thought of sleep or of my own needs. All that mattered was being present for my child. And yet now, when the years had turned the tables, my own daughter could not bring herself to board a plane for me. What Rachel didn't know, what no one in the family knew, was that I had been holding a secret for over 15 years. When my husband Thomas passed away, he left me everything: our home, our investments, and a fortune that had quietly grown to nearly $18 million. He asked me not to speak of it, not even to Rachel, until the time was right. Thomas always believed that wealth should reveal a person's true heart. If she loves you only when she knows of the money, he used to say, then it isn't love at all. So I waited. I watched. I hoped. And that night in the hospital, as I stared at the empty doorway where my daughter should have been, I felt the weight of my husband's words pressing down on me. Friends, before I continue, let me ask you this. If you knew your parents were keeping an entire estate hidden millions of dollars they never mentioned, would that change how you treated them? Would you be more attentive, more loving? Or would you say that love, real love, should not depend on inheritance at all? Think about that while I tell you the rest of my story, because what happened after that night in the hospital changed everything. If you're still watching, comment 1, so I know you're still with me. When I look back now, I can still see Rachel as a little girl running barefoot through the magnolia trees that lined our yard in Savannah. She had curls the color of chestnuts and a laugh that could brighten even the heaviest of days. There were years when it felt like it was just the two of us against the world. After Thomas died, Rachel was only 20. She was finishing college, standing at the threshold of adulthood, and I worried constantly about how she would carry the weight of her father's absence. In those early years, she and I leaned on each other in ways that only a mother and daughter can. We cooked together in the same narrow kitchen where Thomas used to read the newspaper. We planted roses in the front garden, and every Sunday we slipped into our usual pew at Christ Church on Johnson Square. People would nod to us and whisper, "There goes Evelyn and her girl." I wore that whisper like a badge of honor. Rachel was smart, always had been. By the time she graduated, she had offers from big firms in New York City. I remember the night before she left. We sat on the porch swing, the crickets humming in the August heat. She rested her head on my shoulder and said, "Mama, I'll call you every week. You'll see. It'll be like I never left." I believed her. I wanted to believe her. But life in New York moves at a different pace. The weekly calls turned into monthly check-ins. The visits home became fewer and fewer. Instead of evenings on the porch, I received quick text messages. "Busy week, Mama. I'll call soon." When she did come home for Christmas or Thanksgiving, she seemed distracted. Half present, her mind pulled back to boardrooms and client dinners. I tried to be understanding. I told myself this was the price of success, that Rachel was carving out a life for herself in a city that demanded everything from her. And in some ways I was proud. I wanted her to soar higher than I ever could. Still, a quiet ache settled in my chest each time she left the porch swing, swaying empty in the humid Georgia night. There were moments when I thought she might turn back toward me. When she had her first heartbreak, she called in tears, and I stayed on the phone for hours until her sobs softened into sleep. When she was promoted at 30, she sent me flowers with a card that read, "Couldn't have done it without you." For a while I believed those moments meant she still saw me, still valued the roots that held her steady. But as the years stretched on, those glimpses of closeness grew scarce. Her world became skyscrapers and airports, networking events, and conference calls. Mine remained church suppers, quilting circles, and the quiet company of memory. Sometimes I would look at the photographs on my mantel. Rachel as a child in pigtails, Rachel in her prom dress, Rachel tossing her graduation cap, and I would wonder, did she remember the woman who stood behind the camera capturing those moments, or had I faded into the background of her life? The truth is, I kept the secret of Thomas's fortune not just because he asked me to, but because I hoped it would never matter. I prayed that Rachel's love for me would be steady, whether she knew I had $18 million or 18 pennies to my name. Every time she pulled away, I told myself it was just a season, that she would circle back when life slowed down. But life doesn't slow down, not in New York, and not for a daughter who has learned to place her career above her kin. Sometimes at night, I would sit with Thomas's old letters spread out across the kitchen table. He had written them before he died, little notes folded into envelopes marked with my name. One of them read, "Evelyn, remember money is only a magnifying glass. It makes the loving more loving and the selfish more selfish. Use it wisely." I used to trace his handwriting with my finger and think about Rachel. Which way would the glass tilt for her? There was one particular Christmas that stands out. Rachel was supposed to come home, and I baked every cookie she loved as a child. Ginger snaps, sugar cookies dusted with cinnamon, even pecan pie with cream. The tree sparkled, carols played softly on the radio, and I set 2 mugs of cocoa on the table. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. Finally, my phone buzzed with a message. "Sorry, Mama, flight canceled. I'll come next year." I sat there in the glow of the Christmas tree, the untouched cookies cooling on the counter, and realized that next year had become her way of saying, "Not at all." That is the hardest part of being a mother. You remember every detail, every sacrifice, every smile, long after your child has forgotten. You hold on to the past with both hands, even when the present feels like it is slipping away. So by the time I found myself in that hospital bed alone, listening to the nurse say my daughter was too busy to come, I should not have been surprised. But I was. A mother's heart always believes there is still time, still a chance, still a reason to hope. Night at St. Joseph's has its own weather. The air is cool and dry from the vents, the hall lights blink in steady intervals, and the machines sing their little songs as if to remind you that time still moves even when you are flat on your back. I lay there listening to it all, counting my breaths the way the nurse asked me to do, and trying not to count the hours since the first call to Rachel. The cardiologist came just after dawn, a kind man with soft eyes who spoke in careful sentences. He said the episode looked like a warning and not a catastrophe, that rest and follow-up would be essential, that stress is not a friend at my age. I nodded along like a dutiful student, but the only word echoing in my mind was daughter. When he left, I asked the nurse, a woman named Carla, if we could try again. She dialed while I watched her face. I could tell the exact moment the line picked up because she straightened and softened her voice. Then she mouthed to me, "She cannot come today. Important meeting. Tomorrow, maybe. Tomorrow." Such an easy word to say when you are not the one in a hospital bed. Around mid-morning there was a knock on my door, and a familiar figure stepped in, tall and steady in a navy suit. Linda Brooks set her leather briefcase on the chair and took my hand with both of hers. Linda had known my husband since they were young. She had handled every form, every deed, every paper that marked the shape of the life Thomas and I built. To me, she was not only an attorney. She was the sort of friend who understood how to speak when words were needed, and how to keep company when silence was better. I told her about Rachel. I kept my voice even, and it surprised me how easily the facts could be recited. She is in New York. She says she will try to come. She has an important meeting. Tomorrow, maybe. Linda listened, and then reached into her briefcase and placed a small bundle on my blanket. It was a stack of envelopes tied with pale blue ribbon. My name was written across the top one in Thomas's handwriting. The sight of his script, unmistakable in its careful loops, took the breath out of me more than any monitor ever could. Thomas had written the letters in the last months of his life. I had already read a few over the years at moments when I felt adrift, and each one had steadied me like a hand on the small of my back. This top envelope had remained sealed. On the outside, he had written only this: "For the day you must decide." I asked Linda if she knew what he meant. She said she did not exactly, but she knew what he hoped. Thomas had asked her to help me honor two promises. The first was his wish that the fortune he left behind should never become a trap around our daughter's life. The second was that the first promise should be carried out with kindness if possible, and with clarity if kindness failed. Linda opened her briefcase again and brought out a blue binder. Inside were the papers I had avoided for years, not because I was afraid of them, but because I wanted time to do the sorting for me. There were the documents for the trust we established. After Thomas died, the notes about the foundation we had sketched on our porch at sunset, and the draft of a will I had never signed because something in me kept waiting for Rachel to turn her face toward home. We read through the pages together. The trust would allow me to direct the bulk of the estate to the foundation if I chose. The foundation's mission was written in Thomas's careful words: scholarships for first-generation students in coastal Georgia, grants for family caregivers who must leave work to care for someone they love, a small fund for our own church to repair roofs and keep lights on in hard winters. It felt like the man I married had walked into the room and taken a seat at the foot of my bed. Linda did not push. She set the binder aside and said what good counsel always says: "You do not need to decide this minute. But Evelyn, there is something else to consider. If you want Rachel to hear the decision from you and not from a clerk, perhaps this is the time to ask her to come in person." She suggested we give my daughter a clear window, a period of grace. 72 hours. If Rachel came, we would talk as a family. If she did not, I would sign the papers and give my husband's wishes the weight of law. I asked Linda to leave me for a little while so I could read Thomas's sealed letter. She nodded and slipped out, and I slipped a thumb beneath the flap and lifted it open. The paper carried a faint scent of cedar. I read every line twice. He wrote the way he lived with a plain truth that left no splinters. "Evelyn, you have always known how to tell the difference between loneliness and respect. Do not let money confuse the two. If our girl loves you for who you are, she will walk into the room whether there is wealth on the table or not. If she does not come, do not punish her. Free her. Give the money to people who will make a life with it. Give our daughter what she seems to want most, which is the freedom to live without the weight of us. And then rest knowing you kept faith with yourself." While I was still holding that page, the volunteer chaplain stopped by. He did not wear a collar or carry a book. He sat quietly and asked if I wanted to pray. I said I did. He prayed for wisdom, and he prayed for grace. 2 words I had always believed were kin. When he left, I pressed the call button and asked Carla to place one more call to my daughter. This time the call went to voicemail. My voice sounded older than it had the day before. "Rachel, it is Mama. I am in the hospital. I need you to come. There are things I must tell you while I'm still strong enough to say them to your face. Please, honey, please come home." I put the phone down and stared at the notches along the bed rails as the day moved on. Visitors came and went in the rooms across the hall. Balloons, flowers, laughter, tears. A little boy in a red sweatshirt walked past with his granddaddy counting the tiles out loud. Somewhere down the corridor, a woman sang to someone in a voice that quivered and smoothed itself at the same time. The world went on being the world. I waited. In the afternoon, Linda returned with a simple plan. She would schedule a brief meeting in my room for the third day at noon. She would invite Rachel by email and by phone, and she would make it clear that this was not a reading of a will after a death, but a conversation while I was very much alive. If Rachel came, we would talk through everything. If she did not, I would sign the foundation documents that day, and afterward we would send my daughter a letter that was kind, truthful, and final. I thought of Thomas's phrase about the magnifying glass, and wondered how bright it might burn if I shone it upon my own heart. Was I asking Rachel to prove anything, or was I simply asking her to visit her mother when her mother was unwell? The answer, once I named it, was a relief. I was not testing her. I was telling her the truth about my life, and I was allowing her to reply with her own. As the sun shifted across the room, Carla helped me sit upright to take my dinner. The tray held broth and a cup of tea. She fussed with my pillows until my shoulders stopped protesting. Before she left, she hesitated at the foot of the bed. "Do you have someone to bring you home when they discharge you, Miss Evelyn?" I said I hoped my daughter would be here by then. She nodded with the practiced neutrality of nurses who have seen everything and added, "If you need a neighbor sometimes, that is family too." That night I slept in pieces, waking to the soft alarm of a monitor or the sweep of shoes in the hallway. In one of those pockets of wakefulness, I remembered a morning years ago when Thomas and I walked through Forsyth Park. He stopped beneath the live oaks and said that if we were lucky enough to leave a mark in this world, he hoped it would look like a door that was easy for others to walk through. The foundation was to be that door. The question before me now was whether I would open it. By the second morning, an email had arrived from Rachel. It was brief. She could not make the first flight. She would try for the next day. She hoped I was feeling better. There was a line about a client dinner she could not miss. I read it twice and set the phone aside. My mind was strangely calm. The decision I felt was beginning to make itself. Late that afternoon, just as the light turned the walls the color of warm bread, I heard a gentle knock and saw a young woman peeking into my room. She held a paper bag from the market and a shy smile. "Mrs. Carter," she said, "I heard you were here." It was Grace from 2 doors down, the neighbor who had carried my groceries on stormy days and taken a seat beside me at church the Sunday I could not stop crying. She set the bag on my table and asked if she could sit a while. I nodded, and an unexpected ease settled inside me, the kind that comes when another human being chooses to be present without asking for anything in return. The clock on the wall kept its steady count. The third day was almost upon us. Whatever would be said out loud and signed with my hand, and then at last the truth would be clear. If you're still watching, comment 1, so I know you're still with me. The third day arrived with the smell of rain pressing against the hospital windows. Storm clouds had rolled in from the coast, and the city felt wrapped in a heavy gray shawl. I watched the clock tick toward noon with a stillness I did not recognize in myself. Linda sat near the foot of the bed, her briefcase on her lap, her expression calm but attentive. Grace had stopped by earlier with fresh flowers, peonies in pale pink that brightened the sterile room. She offered to stay, but I told her gently this was something I needed to face with my daughter. She squeezed my hand and promised to check back after dinner. At exactly 12 o'clock, the door opened, and Rachel walked in. She looked every bit the part of a New York executive's sharp blazer, sleek hair pulled into a twist phone in hand as if it were a lifeline. For a moment she paused at the threshold, eyes darting from me to Linda. I saw relief flicker across her face, but also impatience like someone who had squeezed in a visit between 2 meetings. "Mama," she said, leaning down to kiss my cheek quickly, "you're looking better than I expected." "Thank goodness." I tried to smile. "I am glad you came, Rachel." My voice trembled, but I steadied it. "It means more than you know." She pulled a chair closer, set her phone on the tray table, and glanced at Linda. "I assume this is about some legal paperwork." "Mama, you should have told me sooner. I could have arranged my schedule differently. I wanted to tell her I had been calling for 3 days, that every minute I lay in that bed I had been waiting for her. But I swallowed those words. Mothers always swallow. Linda cleared her throat softly. "Rachel, I'm here at your mother's request. This isn't easy, but it's necessary. Your father, before he passed, and your mother afterward, established a trust. Evelyn has asked me to explain its terms in her presence." Rachel straightened the executive in her, taking the lead. "A trust. I thought everything was straightforward when Daddy passed. Mama never mentioned any of this." "That was intentional," Linda replied. "Your father believed that wealth should not shape your relationship with your mother. He asked Evelyn to keep the details private until a time of her choosing." Rachel's brows knit together. "So what is this really about? Are you trying to tell me you've been sitting on something all these years?" I took a breath. "Rachel, there is more than you realize. Your father's business investments grew. Over the years, the estate became significant. $18 million to be exact." Her eyes widened. For the first time in a long while, she was silent. I could almost hear the storm pounding against the glass in the pause between us. 18, she repeated as if testing the number. Then she laughed sharply, a sound that cut like glass. "All this time, Mama, you let me struggle in that city, paying ridiculous rent, working endless hours, and you sat here on a fortune." Tears welled in my eyes, but I held my ground. "I wanted to see if you would still come home when I called, if love would bring you, not money." Her face hardened. "That's not fair. You don't know how hard it is out there. I was building something for myself. I thought you understood." Linda opened the binder and set it gently on the table. "Rachel, your father's will and the trust documents state that if in the event of Evelyn's serious illness you failed to come when summoned, the estate would be directed toward a foundation, the Thomas and Evelyn Foundation, rather than passed solely to you." Rachel blinked, as though she hadn't heard correctly. "What your father's words were clear," Linda continued. "Love should not be bought. If Evelyn found herself abandoned, the wealth was to serve the community instead." Rachel shot up from her chair, pacing the small room. "This is insane. You can't actually mean this, Mama. You're going to cut me off completely because I didn't drop everything to fly down here." I clasped my hands together, trembling. "Rachel, for years I asked for nothing but your presence. Holidays came and went, birthdays, Sunday dinners. You always had another priority. This was the moment when I needed you most, and still you delayed. That is what your father feared. He didn't want money to reward neglect." She spun around, eyes blazing. "So what, you're giving it all to strangers? To some charity instead of your only child?" Before I could answer, the door opened quietly. Grace peeked in clearly, surprised to find Rachel there. "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to drop off some tea for Mrs. Carter." Rachel turned sharply. "And who are you?" Grace hesitated, then stepped inside, holding the cup carefully. "I'm Grace. I live next door. I've been helping Mrs. Carter while she's been unwell." Rachel scoffed. "Of course. Mama always did have room for strays." I flinched at the cruelty in her tone. Grace lowered her eyes but placed the cup on the table gently before retreating toward the door. "I'll come back later, Mrs. Carter." "Thank you, Grace," I whispered. After she left, silence filled the room heavier than before. I finally spoke. "That young woman has shown me more kindness in these few weeks than I have felt from my own daughter in years." "Rachel, do you understand why that matters?" Rachel folded her arms defensive. "So you'd rather see your neighbor as your daughter than me? Is that it?" "No," I said softly. "I want you to be my daughter in truth, not just in name. I want to know that when I am weak, you will choose to be here, not because of inheritance, but because you love me." Her eyes flicked to Linda. "This isn't final. You can change it. Tell me you'll change it." Linda's voice was steady. "Evelyn can change it if she wishes, but she has to decide today." The storm outside broke open thunder, rattling the window panes. I looked at Rachel. My child, the baby I once rocked through fevered nights, the young woman I once believed would never turn away from me. And I felt the truth settle like a stone in my chest. "I will honor your father's wishes," I said quietly. "The foundation will receive the estate." Rachel's mouth fell open. "Mama, I am not doing this to punish you." I interrupted, my voice firmer than I expected. "I am doing this to be free, To know that our love, if it exists, is not chained to numbers in a bank. You can still come home. You can still sit on the porch with me. But you will not do it for $18 million. You will do it because you want to. The fight drained from her face, replaced by something I could not read: anger, sorrow, or perhaps both. She gathered her phone, muttered something about needing air, and left the room. Linda closed the binder gently. "You did the hardest thing, Evelyn. You spoke the truth." I leaned back against the pillows, exhausted but strangely lighter. Through the rain-smeared window, I watched the sky split into threads of sunlight, as if even the storm knew it was time to let go. When the storm finally broke that evening, the hospital felt strangely quiet, as if the walls themselves were weary from holding so much tension. Rachel had left without saying goodbye. I watched the door for hours, half hoping she would return, half knowing she would not. But in that quiet, something inside me began to settle. For the first time in years, I no longer felt suspended between hope and disappointment. I had chosen to honor Thomas's wishes, and in doing so, I had honored my own heart as well. The next morning, Linda returned with the foundation papers. I signed them slowly, my hand steady each stroke of the pen carrying decades of memory. With that final signature, the estate was no longer a hidden weight pressing on me. It had become a promise, a door that would open for others who needed a chance at education, a roof over their heads, or a moment of mercy. Some might think I chose punishment. They might call it cruel to leave my daughter out. But it was not cruelty that guided me. It was clarity. Rachel still has the chance to choose me to sit beside me, to rebuild the bond that once defined us. Love is not erased by the absence of inheritance. It is revealed in the presence of care. As the saying goes, you don't inherit love, you show it. That truth is what I want Rachel to learn, whether it takes months, years, or even the rest of her life. And if she ever does return, my arms will be open. Forgiveness is not a ledger to balance. It is a gift freely given. I will not carry bitterness into the twilight of my days. I will carry hope. In the weeks that followed, Grace visited nearly every afternoon. Sometimes she brought tea, sometimes just herself. We would sit by the window watching the seasons begin to shift, and she would tell me about her classes, her dreams, her small victories. I realized that family is not only written in blood, but in presence, in showing up and bearing witness to each other's lives. Rachel did call once, her voice tight and uncertain. She asked if there was still a chance to talk. I told her simply, "It is never too late to be what you might have been." Those words, penned by George Eliot long ago, seemed to rise naturally in the space between us. Rachel was quiet, but she whispered, "I'll try." That was enough for me. Trying is where forgiveness begins. And that, friends, is the heart of this story. Yes, it is a story of family betrayal, of a daughter who chose her career over her mother, and of wealth that revealed where hearts truly rested. But it is also a story of grace. Betrayal does not have to be the final word. We can choose to forgive even when we do not forget. We can choose to open the door even when the other has closed it too many times before. The Bible reminds us, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." My treasure is no longer hidden in bank accounts or sealed envelopes. It is here in the friendships that surround me, in the foundation that will bless others, in the quiet possibility that Rachel may yet come home, not to claim a fortune, but to reclaim her place in my heart. So I ask you, those who are listening now, when was the last time you called your mother? When was the last time you sat with your father, not because you had to, but because you wanted to? Life has a way of slipping past us, and tomorrow is never promised. If you carry one thing away from my story, let it be this: show your love now. Don't wait for inheritance or illness or regret to remind you what really matters. If you still have parents, call them today. If you are blessed with children, hold them close and teach them by your presence what true love looks like. And if your story too has shadows of family betrayal, let forgiveness be the lamp that guides you forward. Before you go, I'd like to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, if your parent were suddenly in the hospital, what would you do? Would you drop everything to be there, or would you hesitate? Your answer might surprise you, and it might remind you of what really matters. Please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you won't miss more stories that stir the heart and remind us of the values we hold dear. Because in the end, wealth fades, careers change, even family bonds can fracture. But love, the kind that shows up, forgives, and endures, that is the only inheritance worth leaving behind.